Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's On the Beat. And tonight, a little bit of a change. I'm going to be flying solo tonight on the On the Beat show. So I'd like to welcome you to the show tonight. It's brought to you by Eagles each Monday night. I hope you were here last Monday. And I know we're supposed to look ahead, but not back. But boy, I'll tell you, people are still talking about Ray Goff being on the show. And I just want to thank you as an audience for the moment in the memory that you gave Ray Goff and Kirby Smart, for them to see that support, and they go back through and read the comments, and they see what this Dog Nation website and this fan base is all about, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Facebook Live. And I'll tell you, that was special. And I think because of this audience and the way that you all support our shows, I think that's why Kirby and why Ray Goff and why Tom Crean, I think that's why they come on Dog Nation, because I think they understand what this is all about. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the news. It has been a really busy and newsy week. And I think we've all been riding that roller coaster. Are they going to play a season? Are they not going to play a season? And do you judge them by the actions, or do you judge them by the words? Because the words have been pretty negative. And we've heard analogies made about being down 3 touchdowns going in the fourth quarter. We've heard Greg Sankey talk about running out ground balls. That's not the kind of leadership that I want to hear. I'm kind of an upbeat, positive person. But they're the administrators, and they say what they say. But the actions are telling me that it's leaning towards the season once again when you start talking about last Friday, the Southeastern Conference saying that if a student athlete doesn't want to play sports this fall, they'll protect their eligibility. So you could be a junior or a senior and say, you know what, I'm just not comfortable amid this COVID-19 atmosphere. And they'd say, that's fine. You're going to stay in good standing with the school. We're going to protect your year of eligibility and give you that extra year of eligibility if you don't want to play. Why would you make that rule if you weren't planning on moving forward? And then tonight, on Twitter, not too long ago, I found myself, I wouldn't say embroiled in any type of debate, but I had an exchange with Dan Wilkin, who covers college football for the USA Today. And just so you know, Dan and I go way back. It's nothing personal. Dan used to cover Memphis when I was covering Tennessee, and he covered Calipari, and I covered Pearl. So we really clashed a lot at the onset of Twitter, back when sports writers were having these Twitter beefs before things got out of hand, and we all just realized, boy, it's really not worth it to attack each other on Twitter. So Dan and I have a history, but I wasn't looking for a scrap tonight. I was just trying to make the point that college athletes are safer on campus in a controlled environment around other tested college athletes, around doctors 24/7 in controlled environments, than they would be if they were just set free in an uncontrolled 18 to 24 demographic, because you don't know who's been tested and who hasn't. Greg Sankey, though, I thought he made a pretty pointed response. Apparently, he was being interviewed by HBO reporter David Scott, and the reporter basically said, haven't you already put them at an increased risk of infection just by bringing them to campus for training? And Sankey said, well, first of all, let's be clear. We haven't flown any student athletes back to the campuses. Some of them will drive back to campuses. Others make their own arrangements. So in comparison to what are you putting them in danger? To having them work out at home gyms that, quite frankly, have been hotspots for the virus spread, without any oversights from sports medicine specialists, without strength and conditioning coaches? You're telling us that that's safer than being on campus in a controlled environment? And so I think that Sankey's conclusion that reality makes that the right decision to have them on campus. So when we hear people talk about putting student athletes at risk in a football program, it ain't from COVID-19. They're safer from a COVID-19 perspective in a controlled environment. That's just common sense. That's common sense versus politics. Now, I've heard some people talk about the optics of this. Well, the optics of what? Well, colleges make money off of football. They have for decades. What about the optics of concussions? What about the optics of potential paralysis? Football is inherently a dangerous game. It's very much about taking measured risks. And the student athletes, the coaches, the administrators, the presidents are on board with those measured risks, the nature of the game. And I don't think it's a giant jump to get on board with the measured risk of COVID-19 in the 18 to 24-year-old age group. Now, you get outside that age group, and there's the potential for complications. We have to wonder how they're going to manage the referees, the coaching staff, the support personnel. I had a Georgia parent tell me this recently. When a lot of the Georgia football student athletes went back home over the 4th of July break, he told his son to stay on campus for a couple of reasons. One, he felt his son was safer on campus than coming back home over the 4th of July break. And two, he felt like the family was safer with the son staying on campus. Now, that sounds kind of weird, but think about it. When the student athletes stay on campus, 90 to 95% of their time, they're in that football building or in that tutorial center or in the training room or in the classroom or in the meeting room with others who have been tested, as opposed to going back home, as opposed to being at the grocery store, as opposed to being at the gas pump, where they would interact with other age groups that could have potentially higher risk factors. I think college football needs to be played for a number of reasons, but most importantly, to protect the student athletes and the families of the student athletes. So if you want to say what's the best and what's the safest for the college football student athlete and their families, it's having a football season. I still haven't really figured out who benefits if there's not a season. Now, that said, you've noticed that the Ivy League and most recently the SWAC have announced that they're not going to play fall football. They're going to wait until the spring. And they're saying that they're doing it out of safety and concerns. And I don't doubt that. But here is the other caveat to that. They don't have the television contract that the Southeastern Conference does, or the Big Ten, or the Big 12, or the ACC. They rely on their gate attendance. They need people in the stands for money. Well, right now, with all this social distancing, we're looking at models in the NFL of approximately 25%. I'm pretty sure the NFL has said they're going to leave it up to the individual franchises. Just like I think in college football, I think it could vary from state to state, depending on what the different legislative moves are, depending on what the local rules and regulations are when it comes to the spacing. But the television contract money is what makes it more appealing to the big conferences, and why some of the other conferences that don't have TV contracts are so quick to shift into the spring. Because guess what? If they play spring football, they actually stand a better chance of getting a television contract than if they play in the fall. So there are some financial incentives to those conferences moving to the spring, above and beyond the safety card, if you will. So just trying to bring as much knowledge and perspective to all that as I can. More politics than I want to talk, but I felt it was important just because of the comment that Greg Sankey made. Greg Sankey has made the argument that, yes, student athletes are safer on campus. I've been waiting for that to happen. I've been making that argument, and those of you that watch the show know. I told you that that's what Gene Stallings told me in the middle of April. When all this was first hitting, he said, Mike, I'd rather have these guys on campus where myself and my medical staff could take care of them. That's what Gene Stallings said way back before anybody thought about it. These coaches that have been around, absolutely brilliant. And there's nothing wrong with saying that out loud. It doesn't make you a bad person to say you believe there should be football this fall, especially when you apply that logic and that rationale. In fact, I would encourage you to make that argument. when you feel necessary, when you see the people, and I don't want to use the word fearmonger, but when you see the other argument being made, there is two sides to this. Now, I want to talk about some Georgia football news. Last week, JT Daniels was cleared to be eligible right away, which I think most everyone that watches Dog Nation kind of thought that was going to be the case. I talked about that quite a bit. I'd written about that. There was no way that kid was going to transfer from Southern California to Georgia without knowing that there was a really, really good chance he'd get cleared to play. And why wouldn't he? He only played a half of a game at Southern Cal. He didn't even play a full game out there. And the NCAA doesn't want to punish a kid and make him miss 2 seasons. Now, the Cade Mays news, that's a little bit different. Cade's transferring in conference. So in addition to getting an NCAA waiver, Cade Mays would need an SEC waiver. SEC schools, when you go from conference school to conference school, they typically make you spend that 1 year in residence. Cade's going to need a really good reason why he should be back home. Now, he is back around his family, and that's a strong case. But it's not like he was coming back from Hawaii. Athens is only about 3.5 or 4 hours away, depending on which way you drive and how fast you're driving. So Cade Mays still up in the air, and we learned that he really didn't even file his appeal until a couple weeks ago. I can't tell you why that would be. We do know he has a pending lawsuit against the University of Georgia. Well, his father does for the whole pinky finger in the lawn chair. And my goodness, did we worn out the jokes on that? I'll just say that if you got your pinky finger caught in the lawn chair, other than some expletives, that had to be horrifying to see for him to see like his pinky. And Sam Pittman was the one that picked it up off the ground. Here you go. I mean, can't you just see Coach Pittman? The whole scene seems surreal to me. But Cade signed with Georgia anyway, right? So anyway, the fallout from the JT Daniels, it's almost like the national media is like waking up, right? Like we've already talked about all this. We being Dog Nation, myself and Brandon Adams and Connor Riley, Jeff Sentell, and you've discussed it with us on our message board. We've talked about it. But now the national media is like, oh, hey, look what's happening. Oh, this is going to be a high-profile quarterback. No, it's not. No, it's not. First of all, George doesn't play it that way. Even when it was Fields and Fromm, Kirby didn't have much to say. There were a couple times he discussed it, and it basically came down to this. Who's going to lead our team? Who's going to move the team on the field the best? When we put them out there on the field in that scrimmage situation, who's going to get the ball in the end zone? Who can I trust to control the ball and not turn it over? It's that simple. It's really that simple. Which guy does better? That's what Kirby Smart's going to decide. Which guy makes the offense better? And so I've kind of objected to some of the revisionist history that I've heard this week, a la Fields and Fromm. And I'm going to give you a quick refresher and move on. First of all, people need to remember, when you're a freshman coming in, college football is a really big step. I mean, Peyton Manning was third string at Tennessee. He was behind Todd Helton, the baseball player, and Jerry Colquitt. And there was a reason for that. As advanced as Peyton Manning was coming in, Archie Manning's son, probably in my mind, the highest football IQ in a college football quarterback that I've run across was Peyton Manning. Eric Zier's up there too, by the way. He was pretty advanced. But Peyton, the son of a legend, watching football film with his dad since he was 4. Prodigy, right? Third string. The Justin Fields that everybody saw last year is not the Justin Fields that was at Georgia as a true freshman. Point number 1. Point number 2, the type of quarterback that Georgia needed. When you've got 3 NFL receivers, probably 4 really when you count Holloman, because I think J.J. Holloman's going to be an NFL receiver, and Mecole Hardman and Riley Ridley and Terry Godwin. And then you got an NFL tight end and Isaac Nauta, and you got an NFL running back and DeAndre Swift. You need someone that can distribute the ball. And that's what Jake Fromm did really well. He spread the ball out. Now, Justin Fields is a great athlete and a playmaker. This year's Georgia team, I believe, needs more of a playmaker because I see George Pickens out there, but guess what? The defense does too. I don't know how quickly Jermaine Burton can pick up the playbook. I'm not sure how far along Dominic Blaylock is in his comeback from the knee. I'm hearing good things about Trey McKitty, but I don't know how diverse the offense can be coming out of the gate. I think they're going to have to keep it simple for a little while. The backfield, I've got questions about Zamir White catching the football. Kenny McIntosh, very little experience, only 25 carries. Kendall Milton's a true freshman. James Cook was hot and cold. Can he be relied upon? So because there's more questions at those skill positions, I think you're going to ask your quarterback to do more. I think you're going to ask him to keep the ball more on the RPO. I think you're going to have fewer reads before the tuck. And so I think it makes sense for Jamie Newman to be ahead of JT Daniels, who I see as more of a distributor, right? So I think it favors the playmaker this year. But in 2018, it didn't. You had a system in place that brought you within one play of winning the national championship. And quite frankly, it was on the defense. Let's face it. 2nd and 26, they shouldn't have been able to execute that into a touchdown. I don't care, what happened in the 3rd or 4th quarter. The defense lost that football game, not Jake Fromm. So you've got a quarterback you believe in, you trust, because it takes a while for a defensive coach or any coach to trust a quarterback. Is he going to do the right things? Can I trust him to throw the ball away? Is he going to make the right checks? So you had a guy who built all that up versus a young guy who's learning the system as he goes. And you can see it happen. One tuck, one read, wasn't there, Justin Tuck can run. Okay, so that's how it was in 2018. I can't tell you what it would have been like in 2019. We can all guess and suppose. But the people that are saying that Kirby had it wrong in 2018, they either don't understand football or they've got amnesia on how things were then. Because every situation is a little bit different. And quarterback is the most dependent position probably in just about all of sports when you think about it. Obviously, the point guard on a basketball team, he has to rely on guys to make a shot before he can get credit for the assist, right? And he's got to have guys open, a post guy that can post up. But the quarterback is really reliant on several things: the blocking assignments, the coaches, the schemes, the receivers, their ability to get open, their ability to run their routes at the right depth, their ability to make the right read. In a pro-style offense, the quarterback and the receiver have to make side adjustments. They have to go to the line essentially and see the same thing as far as how that DB is playing. If the DB is playing them outside in, you do this. If the DB is playing you inside out, you do that. And they have to be on the same page. They also have to be on the same page with the audibles. And so that's why last year when Georgia had all those guys going in and out of receivers, it looked like a train wreck. So I'm not sure what would have happened at quarterback with Justin Fields last year. Honestly, I don't think Georgia would have beaten LSU with Justin Fields. I don't know what they would have done against South Carolina. They had almost 500 yards of total offense in that game. But it is what it is, and it was what it was. So I want to kind of get that off my chest because revisionist history is something that bothers me as a sports journalist. When people try to tell you how it really was. And you go, that's not how it was. So there, I've said my piece on that. Today's big news, and I think it's big news, is Divaad Wilson's transfer. Divaad Wilson was a guy coming into his redshirt sophomore year who was growing in the program. Divaad played in all 14 games for Georgia last year. He had 24 tackles. I think we all remember that interception against Notre Dame in the second half in Irish territory. Really kind of turned the momentum. That was a big play for Divaad. He also had a third down pass breakup. So Divaad Wilson really showed up in that Notre Dame game. Didn't play against Baylor. He was injured. But I believe there were some issues at home that his mother talked about on Twitter not too long ago. She credited Dan Lanning with reaching out to the family and trying to help. You know, Divaad has a younger brother, and Lanning had intervened to try and help the family. I think Divaad felt the call of the family. And let's face it, amid this coronavirus pandemic, we've all, I think, we've all probably come to value our family more. We certainly have elevated the value of our family time, taking care of family members. And then on top of it, you know, Divaad probably wasn't going to start this year at the star position. You know, him and Mark Webb had been in a really good battle there. Tyreek Stevenson has really emerged. A lot of people are thinking maybe that's where Kelee Ringo will go because Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes at corner and Keely's a little bit bigger. So maybe we see Ringo there. There's a lot of different guys that can play that position. The Georgia secondary is so deep. And I put a story up, and at the bottom of the story, I listed all the guys that are in the secondary. There's still 15 DBs in the Georgia secondary right now. And another thing that you should note is that Georgia is over on scholarships. When the summer started, I think there were 88 guys listed on scholarship. So if Devad is left, that will leave him with 87. So there's still some room for attrition there, still some likely attrition. And we speculated on that in the Dog Nation forum. Who could it be? Nothing negative, right? It's just we're talking college football, and these are numbers, and we got to figure out, who's going to be the guys that make the 85-man roster. I know there's been a lot of speculation at different positions. I've got my thoughts. I'm sure you have yours. We'll keep an eye on that. Look, being a Georgia football player, it's tough, right? You got to be special to be a part of this program right now. Everybody on this team earns their keep. Just getting through the door is tough at Georgia. Staying on the team. Because guess what? Every year they're going to recruit more and more guys at your position. And it's up to you to beat them out. It's up to them to get the great players. It's up to you to get better and win those jobs. So that's going to be pretty interesting watching those scholarship numbers moving forward. I saw a graphic today. I wanted to talk about the receiving core a little bit. I'm going to adjust this camera. I got too much blue sky above me, right? That better? So when they were talking about the leading returning receivers as far as their percentage of targets outside the numbers, right? Outside the hash marks, perimeter receivers. George Pickens had the highest percentage of targets outside the numbers of any receiver in the SEC. And I think that says a lot. It says a lot about George's hands, but it also said a lot about Jake's ability to throw that out route that only George could catch. That was, when you think about your George Pickens memories, at least for me, I think about George running those out routes, the way he could extend and bend, the body control that he had, the way he was able to use his body to keep himself between the ball and the defensive back. And that makes it a very high percentage pass. This year, I think you're going to see George do more things. I think his route tree will grow regardless of who's at quarterback. But the number for George last year, I'll find it here, 54% of his targets came outside the numbers. Think about that, how heavily they relied on him. Josh Palmer at Tennessee and that Jim Chaney offense was second, 53.5. It was a very similar offense. Now, this year's offense, it's going to be completely different. Okay, there's new terminology and there's new routes being run. The Georgia offense you're going to see this year will look different. And I know a lot of Georgia fans are excited about that. The key, though, the keys for Kirby remain the same. You've got to be able to run the ball effectively in short yardage. You've got to be able to do that. You got to be efficient, right? You can't turn the ball over. This isn't going to be a high-risk, high-octane offense. I think it's going to be a high-efficiency offense. And the key, to me, is those explosive plays. The difference between 2018 and 2019 was we didn't see the same explosive plays from DeAndre Swift, largely because the perimeter blocking wasn't as good. You lost Jason Stanley and Riley Ridley, Terry Godwin. These were some guys that really knew how to control the corners and the safeties in the open field. So that 25-yard DeAndre Swift run turns into a 75-yard run. Well, last year's group, obviously they weren't as well-versed in that. They were a lot younger, and quite frankly, they weren't as good blocking on the perimeter. And this offensive line, I also think, will be a little bit more mobile this year. So I think that will open it up for Georgia to get on the perimeter a little bit more with a little bit more mobile offensive line. And I think you're going to see better blocking on the perimeter. So I think you're going to see, even though I don't see a running back that I'm convinced is as good as DeAndre Swift yet, and there's still plenty of time for these guys to get better. But DeAndre Swift was special, and make no mistake about it. He was in the same breath with Chubb and Michelle. I'm not ready to anoint anyone in the current backfield at that level yet. That's not to say they can't have explosive plays. I know Kenny McIntosh had that 65-yard run last year against one of those weaker teams. But still, you got to have the perimeter blocking. You've got to be able to spread the field. And I'm convinced that Georgia is going to be able to spread the field. And I think it's going to be with Jamie Newman out of the gate because of the things that we just talked about the experience at receiver, about the different types of quarterbacks that you want to have to fit different offensive skill positions and expertise and experience level. And that's just why it makes sense. Now, that's not to say that JT Daniels can't emerge and play quarterback, and who knows, maybe even start. The statistic that I remind everyone of, only 4 out of 14 teams in the league last year got through the season starting the same quarterback. Think about that. 10 out of 14 teams, almost 2/3, had to play at least 2 quarterbacks. At least 2 quarterbacks. So your number 3 quarterback is kind of the new number 2 quarterback. So when I hear people talk about quarterbacks that could transfer, I say, I don't think so. I feel like Dwan Mathis is pretty entrenched just based on what I've seen from the quotes from his teammates and the quotes from his father. If you've ever watched Friday Night Mike, Terrence Mathis drops in there every now and then in messages with fans. And if you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about. And Carson Beck now, Carson's a fighter, one, but two, Carson could ultimately be, of these 4 quarterbacks, when it's all said and done, Carson could ultimately be the best, because you look at all the different intangibles that he possesses and the traits. And Carson looks to me like a guy that can play in a pro style, but that he also has incredible athleticism. I look at Carson Beck as maybe a young Carson Wentz. I don't know what y'all think about that, but when I think of Carson Wentz, I think of a big, strong quarterback who's also athletic, who's very mobile, and can beat you a lot of different ways. I know the Eagles haven't done a whole lot most recently, but it just strikes me as a guy that when Beck fills out, I think he's an NFL quarterback. Dwan Mathis could be too now. Dwan's 6'6", and I don't know what mold I put him in. I don't put anybody in the mold of Cam Newton. I know Jamie Newman compared himself to Cam Newton, and I just thought, Jamie, you got a long way to go. He threw Donovan McNabb and Steve McNair out there too. So I'm glad that Jamie has confidence, but what I saw at Wake Forest wasn't Steve McNair, wasn't Donovan McNabb, and wasn't Cam Newton. I hope that changes at Georgia. I sure do, because that would be a great season. And obviously Kirby Smart believes in Jamie because he's talked a lot about him, and he's told us that he's been a leader. But Jamie's got to continue to win that locker room, because he's going to have his hands full holding these guys off. This is a good thing. This is a good thing that Georgia has all these great players at this position. Something that I'm not sure if fans understand, because it took me a long time as a beat guy to really be able to wrap my brain around how these great athletes think. For a simple guy like me, who didn't play anything past high school football, at least not organized, I wanted to be the starter every game, and if the other guy did bad, that was good for me. Well, that's not how these Bulldogs think. They all root for each other. They want everybody at their best, and that's the way they've been brought up as leaders, is to encourage everyone to compete and be at their best, and keep the competition clean and in the best interest of the team. I think Georgia does that. I think there's that level of buy-in. I can't speak to the whole Fields and Fromm dynamics. Remember, there was a lot of pressure on Justin Fields to play right away. That's really not fair to these kids, because, as I've said, you've seen the pressure. Look, Tom Brady didn't play till late in his career. Guys develop at different rates, and different offenses call for different quarterbacks. It's tough to learn a pro-style offense. If Carson Beck doesn't play much as a freshman, that doesn't mean he can't be a great quarterback. I think Carson Beck will be a great quarterback, just a matter of where. Same with Dwan Mathis. So when I see fans say things like, well, it's not good, one of them needs to leave, don't think that way. Not necessarily. These guys are bought in. They're high-level athletes. They don't root against the other guy. They just root for themselves. It's like when you're playing golf, right? Play your ball. Don't worry about the other guy. If you start worrying about what the other guy's doing, you're going to lose your game. You got to play your ball and play your game. So that's my thought on the quarterback competition. Thought that was interesting. Earlier this week, I did a story on Georgia's dynamic defensive line. And I remember that 2018 team, what I thought was missing from the get-go, and I think a lot of you identified it as well, Georgia wasn't as good up front as they were in 2017. The 2017 Georgia team was the best team in college football, was Roquan Smith. There's no doubt about it. It'll still go down as one of the best teams in college football that didn't win a national title, in my mind, Auburn regular season game aside. But 2018, where they fell off, and the reason they got handled by LSU in Baton Rouge on that daytime game was they got beat in the trenches. Joe Burrow didn't beat him with his magical arm or the dynamic receivers. They were good. Where he beat him was converting 4-4 and fourth down runs. And I don't know if you remember that, but that was a big factor. They could not get off the field. They could not stop the LSU run game. And to me, that was the problem. That was the Achilles heel of 2018. Last year, I thought the defensive line really stepped up. Really, the whole defense did. They led the nation in run defense. They didn't allow a rushing touchdown until the 10th game of the season. And check me on this, but I think both of the rushing touchdowns they gave up last year were by quarterbacks. I know against Auburn they were. I think that number might be right. Can't remember if LSU had a rushing touchdown other than a quarterback. But here nor there, it was a great run defense. This year, they're going to be even better. They're going to be even better. Listen to that. And now remember this, Kirby counts his outside linebacker as a defensive lineman. So whether it's Azeez Ojulari or Jermaine Johnson, he counts that as a D lineman. And I needed to start doing that when I did those report card features after the game, counting that outside. Because a lot of times, and excuse me for my water, it was a really hot day and I walked, and I think I'm still trying to replenish myself. But a lot of times those DNs or those outside linebackers act as DNs, and they actually have contained responsibilities. I let DeAndre Walker and Brenton Cox, Alabama 2018. So at outside linebacker now, you've got Azeez Ojulari, a future NFL player, Jermaine Johnson, a future, and I saw Jermaine said he's weighing 260 now. It doesn't sound like a linebacker to me. Nolan Smith, the former #1 recruit. I think we all love Nolan's athleticism. If you've ever heard Nolan speak, I used to live in the same apartment building as him for a year, and I'd run into him from time to time. And let me tell you, he is just a pleasure. He is just a really fun kid and a real dynamic personality. I think you're going to get to see a lot more of this year. Adam Anderson, boy, can he bring it from the outside? He just strikes you as one of those freak athletes. I remember back in the spring when DJ Shockley was interviewing those guys. It was actually January when he interviewed the incoming freshmen. I forget which one said it, but he said, man, that Adam Anderson, that was the guy that jumped out at him in terms of just never seen an athlete like that. Adam is special. And then you go inside a little bit, and Travon Walker, to me, I asked this question in our forum the other day. Some of you are in the Dog Nation forum. Some of you aren't. If you aren't, you need to get in there. If you're not following me on Twitter, at Mike Griffith 32, probably another thing you want to do, follow me on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32. Probably want to share the show tonight with some of your friends. Maybe they want a little Georgia catch up. Do them a favor by sharing this podcast with them. But if I had to invest in one guy on that front line, including the outside linebackers, I think I would invest in Travon Walker. This guy is so impressive to me. When you consider he was a true freshman, it's so hard for a true freshman to play on the line because most of the guys on the line are usually juniors and seniors. They're grown men. They're 20, 21, 22. They've had that training table for 3 years. Let me tell you, that calorie load, it's a lot different when you're playing football. You see a lot of these guys now, and they're done playing football. A guy like David Pollock running around looking skinny, you're like, wait a minute. You ain't the same guy I saw playing at Georgia. Was all puffy and weighing 265, 270. They get off that training table. Well, conversely, when they go from high school to college, they get on that training table and train, and they're just eons ahead of most incoming freshmen. So for Travon Walker to do what he did last year and overcome the wrist surgery mid-season, I mean, this kid is big, fast, talented, and tough. And I can't wait to see what he's going to do this year. Malik Herring is one of the top-rated defensive players in the league. He is the top-rated defensive lineman coming back, according to Pro Football Focus. Malik is a very underrated guy. I think he's got a chance to be special. We've talked a lot about Jordan Davis the last 2 years, but Jordan could get pushed a little bit. This Jalen Carter, I keep hearing a lot about Jalen Carter, and he looks good to me. And don't forget, Julian Rochester's back. Julian redshirted last year as a senior, and Julian was a starter 2 years ago, so there's some real beef there. Devontae Wyatt was the guy that was leading the calisthenics. I thought that was interesting. Devontae is a guy that we just I think we overlooked, but Devontae was actually second on the team in quarterback hurries. I think he had like 25, and I think he had more tackles, like 30, than any other interior defensive lineman. So Devontae Wyatt quietly had a very good junior year. I think Kirby Smart's noticed that. I think you're going to see a lot out of him. Now, before I go to the questions, this Phil Steele top 25. I mean, listen, I've got a lot of respect for Phil Steele. I really do. It's not easy trying to pick a top 25 and do your homework and your research. And I know this. I've been that guy where I've studied and researched. Sometimes you see too many numbers and you kind of overthink it. Let me tell you, folks, anybody that's got Georgia ranked as the fourth best team in the SEC has overthought it. It's not a matter of ignorance. It's not a matter of not understanding. He's just really overthought this. And my goodness, it's a 325, 350 page preview. The type's so small. When you do that much work, I'm not going to be overly critical. I'm just going to tell you that when I saw Georgia at number 7 overall, number 4 in the SEC, the first thing I thought of was some grad assistant cutting it out, putting it on a weight room, bulletin board, because Kirby loves it. Kirby loves it. Loves it. One little point here. I don't know, did you guys see that of the NBA players, the 346 players in the bubble, no positive test? Thought that was really interesting. You take a look at some of your comments now. I've kind of gone through a lot of these items in the last week that jumped out to me as being important, integral, things that are really going to matter. What do we got here, guys? This is interesting. Antoine Middleton says Ringo had taken Rochester's number. The number 1's open. So who do you guys think should get the number 1 on defense? Now that Divad Wilson is transferring out, who do you think should take the number 1? I think I've seen Jalen Carter mentioned for this, although it would look utterly ridiculous to me. I am not a fan of the single digit on the defensive lineman or on the running back. To me, a running back is a 2-digit number, and to me, a defensive lineman should be wearing something in the 90s, maybe the 80s. I know there's this trend now, though. So who gets the number 1 now? That's going to be interesting. I'll be interested to see which player gets. I'm trying to think. Richard LeCounte's number 2. He's not going to change his number. Stokes sure isn't going to change his number. Neither will Tyson Campbell. He's number 3. Let's just see. I see my producer, Michael Carvel, says the number 1 looked great on Derek Brown. Well, that's Auburn. This is George and Michael. And not all these guys. Look at this. Shelton Tucker says anybody that beats Alabama will be number 1. William Gleet wants to know if Devon's going to Miami. And that would be my bet, because he does want to be closer to home. But you never know. There's other programs down there. I know the big, fear, concern is that he'd go to Florida. I can't see that happening. But you never know. I mean, listen, the guys have got to do what's best for them. And I think the Georgia fan base is pretty good about supporting guys when they move on. I know the Fields thing was tough, but I think most Georgia fans are genuinely happy that Justin found a good situation. And he's doing great up there. And he does fit up there. He fits that offense and that personnel better. And I think Divad Wilson could be a great Miami Hurricane. And he grew up in that area. And I know from my trips down there, I like to go to South Florida a lot. Obviously not this year, but I know that area pretty well. And I've done a lot of interviews with guys from down there, and I have a pretty good feel on it. And Miami is a really big part of the culture down there. I would be happy to see Divad Wilson at Miami. I would hope he would go down there and have immediate success and immediate eligibility. Someone points out that number 1 is Pickens' numbers on offense. Well, provided George stays out of trouble. Remember when George first came to Georgia, he wasn't wearing the number 1? Well, that's because they had to kind of get a message across to George. So that's what we're all kind of waiting on, is to see. This is kind of interesting. Yeah, the team roster does still have Julian Rochester at number 5. That's interesting. So who knows? Maybe Christopher White is onto something here, and maybe it will be Keely Ringo wearing the number 1. I'm not real sure. Jim Withrow says that Tyreek Stevenson could take number 1, put Ringo in 7. Well, that would be interesting. Always interesting to see what the folks think and what the players are saying. The players, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Georgia players have been a little bit more active and vocal on social media. I follow a lot of them on Instagram, and they'll put a lot of their music up and some of their hometowns, a lot of their workouts. It's a really good way to keep up with them. That's how I found out Jamie Newman had come back early to do some working out with Dwan Mathis over the summer. Jamie had posted a picture of the the Classic Cities downtown courthouse. You could see that unmistakable dome. And I said, well, how about that? Jamie Newman's here in Athens. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun season. I hope you guys have gotten the same drift that I have this week. I think college football is coming back. It's on the comeback trail. Right now, I've seen the same numbers that you have in the way that coronavirus, COVID-19 spreading. I will be just one more person to tell you, wear your mask, make good decisions, take measured risks, protect your family. But in my mind, I'm not feeling guilty about moving forward. I've got one life to live, and I'm going to be careful, but I've got ambitions and I've got work responsibilities that I look forward to every day. And I'm going to be as careful and measured as I can while still moving forward. And I would encourage you to do the same. Be smart about it. You've got your opinions. You're entitled to them. You can defend them, but be courteous of others. Try to be respectful. The great thing about the Georgia fan base that I've noticed, there's not a lot of infighting. There's not a lot of bitterness. People can disagree. It's the same people. It's funny. I'll go back through the comments and you'll see the same people disagreeing with each other every week, and nobody gets ugly about it. We all kind of know who has what opinion, but we're all very good about it. So tomorrow night, Connor Riley. Wednesday night, Jeff Sentell. Of course, Brandon Adams has all of his Dog Nation dailies taped up, and some good shows ahead this week. And I might have a Paul Feinbaum surprise for you. So keep your eye out for that. Keep your ear to the ground. We'll have more stories tomorrow on our Dog Nation page. All of a sudden, it has just come to life. There's been a lot of news. Oh, also today, first day of basketball, Tom Crean, 8 newcomers on this year's basketball team. So it should be interesting to see what happens. Listen, I'm going to cut it short tonight. I appreciate you guys joining me. If you've got any questions, ask them. Drop it in there. I go back through here and I try to answer all your questions. And if you give me a follow on Twitter at MikeGriffith32, I'd appreciate it. And if you could share this file with some people that would be big. The more people that see it, the more opportunities we get to do videos like this. So everyone have a great Monday night. Have a safe week. And I'll be back with Friday Night Mike.